Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Peyton Robertson, the Director of the National Weather Service Office of Organizational Excellence. Glad you're able to join us this afternoon here in the East, for the third of the National Weather Service Partners Summer Webinar Series. Today, we're going to shift our focus to talk a little bit about our partners in the academic community. And I will just recall for you, I was just looking back on my calendar to be a little nostalgic, that it was August 15th of last year that we were assembled in Albany, New York. So that is a distant memory in the rearview mirror, right? But we miss seeing you. We miss getting together as partners for the summer meeting, but we appreciate all of you who have come on board to do this virtually as part 3 kicks off today. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Bleistein to tell you more about the particulars. So thanks, everybody.
Great. Good afternoon. Good morning to some of you. Welcome to our third installment of our partner webinar series, A Change in the Weather. As Peyton mentioned, today's focus is on the research and undergraduate learning. Really, this topic is going to allow our academic partners to share best practices learned over the last 5 months and really foster discussion around future opportunities for educating the next generation of graduates as we prepare them for working in an Earth system science paradigm and also this new paradigm we all seem to be finding ourselves in. So without further delay, I would like to get started and provide a little bit of logistical information. For those of you that may be joining by audio, hopefully you've hit your audio pin so that when we do open up the dialogue later on the latter half of this webinar, you'll be able to speak if you have a question for that way. All lines will remain muted until then, and we are recording the webinar for posting later as well. And without further delay, I do want to introduce our panelists. Actually, Dr. Louis Uccellini is our Director for National Weather Service. He's going to be my co-moderator today. We're going to try and mix things up a little bit. And I'm going to let Louis provide some opening remarks, and then he will introduce our panelists, and we'll take it from there. So Louis, without further delay, let's get started.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrea. So as Peyton noted, we've normally have tended with these partner meetings to focus on components of our entire enterprise that have, I would say, the private sector, the media, and we've had interactions with the academic community, of course. But today we're going to focus this webinar on partnerships with the academic community. They obviously have an enormous responsibility to educate our future workforce, people who work for all of us. So they're facing opportunities and challenges just like all of us, and we thought we would focus on that. NOAA itself, in terms of working these partnerships, support a number of programs. The C-STAR grants that I think many of you are familiar with, cooperative. We provide resources into the NOAA Cooperative Institutes. We certainly participate in the pathway programs that give students the opportunity to work within our facilities. The Holling Scholarship, the Sea Grant, NOWS fellowships that are NOAA programs are also becoming more interactive with other components of NOAA. So it's clearly an increasing number of pathways for the students to come into NOAA, to interact in different parts of NOAA, including the Weather Service, which we will talk about today. So we have two distinguished professors from the academic community, Dr. Seppi Yalda and Dr. Vernon Morris. Seppi, as we affectionately call her, is a professor and director at the Center of Disaster Research and Education at Millersville University. And Vernon is now out at Arizona State University as a professor. So just some brief history on the two of them. Seppi has a PhD in meteorology from St. Louis University. She serves as a coordinator and a pioneer for the undergraduate and Master of Science degree in emergency management program at Millersville University. And she serves on a number of FEMA committees. Her research interest is in disaster preparedness, planning, and community education. Dr. Vernon Morris is a professor of chemistry and environmental science and director of the School of Mathematics and Natural Science at Arizona State University. He's just moved there from Howard University, where he was the principal investigator and founder director of the NOAA Cooperative Science Center in Atmospheric Sciences and Meteorology, known as NCAS.-M. And he founded the Howard University Graduate Program in Atmospheric Sciences. His research focus is on the chemical evolution of atmospheric particulate during transport, residence times in the lower troposphere, and the implication to aerobiology, climate, and cloud processes. Now, I've known these individuals for decades. They have a lifetime, they have what I would call common attributes, all right? They have a lifetime commitment to students, which is really amazing to watch, and having been associated with both of them during their careers and seeing this, it is truly amazing. Their interaction continues well beyond the classroom. They connect the students to career opportunities. They adjust to the changing needs of the National Weather Service and the larger meteorological enterprise. And you can tell with the way they work with students, they're interested in making sure that those students are aware of the jobs out there in this entire enterprise, whether it's the Weather Service or private sector or whomever. They prepare their students accordingly. They stay connected with the larger societal forces. The diversity and inclusion is a very important aspect of what they bring to the teaching, and their students reflect that, and we reflect an openness to everything we need to do as we change in terms of the weather services. And they address the needs of the underrepresented students in every way. So it's truly a lifetime commitment that I've been able to observe in my interactions with both Seppi and Vern. And ultimately, they are preparing us for the workforce of the future. So I think they were two people I certainly wanted to be on this webinar, and I'm glad they've joined us. So Seppi, you get the first turn if you want to say a few remarks.
Sure. Thank you for the kind introduction, and also thank you for the invitation to participate, share ideas, listen, and learn from this important and timely conversation. I have served in this kind of a multiple role, or as I always share with the students, I wear multiple hats at the university, but it has really allowed us to develop programs and opportunities for our students that are certainly maybe not unique to Millersville, but we started some of these programs, and many of these were in collaboration with our partners from across different sectors. So this all didn't happen just by us at the university, but really through a long-standing relationship, starting from our immediate community, continuing all the way to other sectors. So if we could please move on to the next slide. I put this slide together just to give you an idea of the different types of programs, and not to go through all of them, but recognizing the importance of a solid preparation in the fundamental underpinnings. We also wanted to provide a pathway that included a broad range of opportunities that would better prepare the students for not only current but also future workforce needs. So since 2005, again, in collaboration with our multitude of partners from across sectors, we've developed a few programs and options in addition to our more traditional offerings. So we've had the BS in Meteorology program now, I believe, since 1973. And that program by itself has changed quite a bit and has had a number of courses added to it as there were needs in different areas, ranging from modeling to space weather and of course climate dynamics. But we have also gone into different areas. So you can see the list that is shared with you. There's quite a bit of focus in the area of emergency management, as you can see, a BS in emergency management, minors, but also we've delved into areas of integrated scientific applications, which basically connects business and science, and also the areas of space weather. What's interesting is that this has led to a natural synergy among the programs and also different pathways. So even though they may look as if they're different programs, but students can very easily move across these programs and take common courses. For example, a lot of areas that allows the students to really be better prepared are not only their skills courses, but also in areas of planning, continuity of operations, communications, specifically crisis communications and such. One of the other ways that we have really looked at this kind of utility of multidisciplinary certificate and accelerated programs, which are not necessarily new terms, but we are really leveraging on what we have done to try to make it possible for students to gain this information in a timely manner, and also to be able to appeal to a more diverse student population to develop a more diverse workforce. All of the programs include a significant practical and real world application. And we really stress that because we are finding that most of these programs, and some of them are offered online, some they have been offered online from the very beginning of their offerings. But they also, have been in place to accommodate the working professionals and also just what we call our traditional students. So that's another way that I think some of these programs are unique, is that they are really serving a different population. So if you would please go to the next slide. I just wanted to provide a snapshot of what some of our students are doing. But the title we have here, I think, kind of captures it: meeting the workforce needs of all sectors across a broadening enterprise of emerging opportunities. This is obviously not a comprehensive list. This is just a sampling. And I try to put the affiliations of some of these individuals in black underneath to give you an idea. Again, these are some are current students, some are former students, diverse areas across all sectors. And again, many of these folks coming to these programs as working professionals. So this appeal, it's not just to traditional students, but also those that are perhaps early or even mid-career professionals. There are a few areas here that I ran out of room to include, and one is broadcast field, hospitals, financial industry, relief organizations, and energy sector, amongst others. So just to give you a very broad perspective, and the NOAA one has more folks because just we figured that should get the largest spot in the center. But really you can see that it spans from county to state, to federal organizations, to private sector consulting organizations, to, again, colleges and universities, and then we have a strong presence also in the health field. So the current pandemic environment has reminded us of the importance of flexibility, creative options, and the critical need for diverse applications of our offerings. We, like most universities, have had to shift to mainly online offerings and will continue to do so for the fall semester. We were somewhat prepared, and in these areas, a lot of these programs that I shared with you have been offered online and have online options. And the main reason for that was that we could work with professionals in the field, those that wanted to come back for portions of their education or to finish their education. But our students have had some difficult times. They've been impacted by economic instability, work demands, and inability or very limited opportunities to complete practical experiences, which are key to many of our offerings. I was just talking with a colleague, and he works very closely with FEMA's training branch, Emergency Management Institute, and the National Training Center. And he was sharing with me that they're basically completely closed and the training campus is not going to be open until January. And so they're working very hard to try to determine how do they offer some of these practical trainings that really are critical and have to be offered in person. So from a university perspective, and I'll end on this, we're prepared to move forward to serve the workforce needs through a multidisciplinary approach that we have some experience in and have shown to lead to at least our students' ability or even the professionals to be able to move forward. We're just one example of how academia is moving forward to meet these needs. And all of you that are on this webinar, you span a significant breadth of the enterprise. And academia really needs you to help to inform us to meet these workforce needs. And it's essential for us to communicate and collaborate together effectively. So I think this provides a wonderful opportunity. So I hope that provides a good introduction for what you were looking for.
Yes, it does, Seppi. And this notional or basic aspect of the interdisciplinary nature of these new programs are obviously very impressive. So let me turn to Vern Morris there at Arizona State University. Vern?
Vern has to be unmuted, I think.
You got to unmute. Yep.
There.
All right, is that a little bit better?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, sorry. I started off saying thanks. I appreciate being invited to take part in this, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be on panels or engage with both Seppi and Louis. I think, as you said, we've known multi-decadal relationships here with both of these individuals that have been supportive, have been mentoring, and really highly collegial in the effort. So I guess I'll start, just sort of break down what I'll talk about. I don't have any slides, so it'll sort of be partly talking points and partly stream of consciousness based on what I've heard so far. But I'll start off talking about my career path a little bit, because I think that informs my perspectives on inclusion in student preparation. Talk a little bit about the programs that I'm engaged with, effects of COVID, and then some new areas of training. So my career path is highly unlikely. If I were to look back at my 18-year-old self, certainly my 16-year-old self, quite likely my 20-year-old self, he never would have predicted that he would be where he is or have done any of the things that I've been, privileged to be part of. As a first-generation college student, as well as a first-generation graduate student, and I can guarantee you 3 weeks into my first year in college, I was one step away from leaving. And it was mentoring that kept me in the pipeline and all the way through. And so that has definitely informed what I do. It's part of every endeavor that I take, whether it's the field work where we bring students out, to strategic planning, to proposal writing. It's giving students an opportunity to be engaged in that. And I think that really has defined how I look at the challenge of inclusion in geosciences, which geosciences is the least diverse area in STEM, science, engineering, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It has remained sort of staunchly non-diverse. And my perspectives on that are very different from what a lot of mainstream perspectives are. It's not about students not knowing, it's about access and students having the opportunity to be part of the enterprise and then taking down barriers along the way. And so, as Louis mentioned, started the first atmospheric sciences PhD program at an HBCU. The first meteorology program was at Jackson State. in terms of HBCUs, but we started the first interdisciplinary program, which was housed in chemistry and physics and mathematics and engineering. And that allowed our students to come from their siloed disciplines, but reach across the silos to really get a comprehensively interdisciplinary understanding of the science, and then train a lot more students who were interested but didn't see the pathway, didn't see the access point. And along the way, that program, focusing on opportunities rather than sort of barriers, produced 50% of the Black PhDs in the country since 2006. Produced 1 out of every 3 Latina PhDs in atmospheric sciences was produced by our program between 2006 and 2017. And we're the #1 supplier of Black PhDs to the National Weather Service. That's a single program, and it's a single program with a unique perspective. And I think looking at some of these perspectives, which are highly transferable, could really revolutionize how we look at diversity nationwide. Another thing, and NOAA was heavily invested in that program. NOAA's been a partner in that program for the last 20 years. Louis downplayed the role that NOAA had in that program, as well as the program in Jackson State, which produces, I think, 1 out of every 4 Black degreed meteorologists comes out of the Jackson State program over the last 30 years. So these are singular programs that have a huge impact, and the lesson learned is to transfer some of those, not create something new, but just transfer the things that worked. And I think you can have a huge impact on diversity. Last thing, in terms of access, is we created a network with NOAA's help, and actually private sector investment as well, of high school weather camps, the first ones that offered free access to students of color. And nearly 1,000 students participated in those camps. Over 700 were Black, Latino, Native American, Indigenous. 60% ended up majoring in STEM degrees in college, 30% got advanced degrees. So it's not a lack of interest, it's a lack of access. It's a lack of addressing barriers that prevent people from getting through. And I think that's what an inclusive private sector could ultimately look like, is building partnerships like this that address access points versus we need to get students interested. Students are interested. And so I think when we look at elements of the academic programs, the advanced degree programs that have worked, it's been these partnerships primarily with Weather Service, but certainly with NOAA, also with a couple of other federal agencies, in which we team the faculty member, the graduate student, with an individual in the federal agency. They co-develop the project. They work through collaboratively, and this one buttresses the infrastructure at the university. It helps the faculty understand what's needed by the agency and in the workforce. The student knows all the way through, and you've created a critical element for the workforce by the end of the day. Hopefully they go into NOAA for this particular program, but there's access points in NASA, in private sector, in EPA, et cetera. And so this sort of collaborative experiential training is something that we've worked with that's been very successful. And I think it's something that we want to translate. Actually, I will end up translating over to ASU. We're looking at the same sorts of partnerships with NOAA, with community, with private sector, that again sort of starts the development of the student's perspective on workforce from year one. And we've got actually a first-year freshman program that we started in the last 5 years that does just that. Students come in after their first year in college, they meet up with a NOAA employee, they have a faculty mentor, and that relationship is cultivated, and actually worked even with the COVID era, where they met weekly with their team. They met 3 times a week with their faculty advisor. They met weekly with all of the other students who were in the program, just to learn about what other people are doing, how they're engaging with NOAA, et cetera. And so that by that way, we're not just offering the opportunity, but we're offering a way of developing community. And again, increasing access, reducing barriers and isolation, and sort of forging things through. And what I think would be a great opportunity for private sector is to actually engage in some of these experiential type partnerships, where private sector is also a co-mentor at the graduate level, at the undergraduate level. And with COVID, I think one of the things that's opened up is the access that Zoom gives across the nation with reduced time, with enhanced flexibility to some extent. Some days are all Zoom and you're tired as you've never been before, but there's also an opportunity there, and I think that's something to think about. COVID's impact on HBCUs, frankly, has been devastating. HBCUs are largely tuition-driven, smaller schools. They've had to be closed, and the critical aspect that has made HBCUs so successful. You have 3% of the academic institutions in the United States responsible for 25% of the African American PhDs. That's a hugely successful enterprise. But right now, the research labs are closed. The campuses are closed. Online technology is not something that was emphasized because the strongest element for MSIs, minority serving institutions, and historically Black colleges and universities have been using HBCUs. Sorry for the acronym soup. But the strongest element of training, why are they so successful? Why are they overproducing? Is because there's a full immersion engagement between students and the research faculty scholars who are committed mentors, who are committed role models, and who dedicate as much as 20 times the number of contact hours per month as the average faculty at a predominantly white institution, a more majority institution. That contact is why those collaborative groups work so well, because now you're including in that high contact a NOAA scientist, or a NASA scientist, or a contractor of NOAA who is working in contact with that student to help them, see themselves as successful in the workforce. And so I think if I were to, speak to the private sector and where are the opportunities in future workforce, if the triple bottom line is more than an aspirational goal, it's profit, planet. If people are actually part of that, then they have to be engaged. The folks that have to be, who are most vulnerable in society to climate, to COVID, to future pandemics, to really the lack of social justice, have to be involved in the ideation, the design, the development, the implementation of the solutions that private sector is going to be engaged in advancing. And that means that there has to be early and sustained engagement throughout, I think, the academic and knowledge enterprise process. So what I challenge all of us is to envision a future where the workforce is not defined by who it excludes, but rather who it includes, and how is it represented not just at the entry point, but at the leadership level. And I'll close for comments, but again, thanks for the time at ASU. I think we got some questions coming up, so I'll close because I can talk.
Seppi. Well, first of all, let me just thank both of you. This has been terrific. Really, really terrific. Seppi, did you have your hand up did you want to say something or? No.
I did
okay.
not. No, I apologize.
Okay. All right. So first, again, let me thank both of you for your opening comments and presentations and laying out, I think a beautiful picture of not only the opportunities but the challenges that you face in bringing your students along. And it sort of confirms my observations about your lifetime commitment that goes well beyond the classroom. And one of the things I was just reflecting on is that I see this at different conferences that I see you both at. You have students there, and you bring them along, and then the next thing you know, they're on their own, right? So it's really a beautiful thing to watch. So with respect to the opportunities and challenges, I just wanted to ask a general question with respect to the interdisciplinary nature of the work that the students are now are dealing with, all right, because it demand where we are today demands a more interdisciplinary approach. And not without getting into specifics in both programs, it seems like you're pointing to this combination of physical and social science that we talk to in building a weather-ready nation. We know we're just touching the surface of all that, but anytime you affect decision-making in any component of this enterprise, there's got to be a human factors aspect in social science. But in your programs, there's probably even more so. So could you speak to that? And I'll start with Seppi.
Sure. We are certainly seeing that, especially students in the physical sciences, not to single them out, but I think a lot of it has been affected by the way that the discipline and the curriculum is set up, that many times they're not introduced to those other elements. So they see the science in a silo. They don't necessarily think of the various impacts or the applications of the science. And I think once they start thinking about not only through opportunities, but just through their experiences, sometimes their personal experiences makes them think about the power of their knowledge if they actually could apply it in different settings. So we certainly have included a lot of social science, both theory, but also really the application of it through these internship academies, and where the students are really immersed in the community and they can really apply what they're learning in a different way. So they're not just doing research, but they are working in a setting that allows them to understand those applications better.
Yeah, I think Seppi articulated it very well, is that I think students are much more engaged and interested in engaging the community with their knowledge. And so we, our NOAA Center actually spans across the psychology department, the economics department, sociology, criminology, history, African studies, communications. There are faculty from all of those departments and students from all of those departments that engage with each other as we develop the student. And so that we try to, the Earth system is a complex problem. It's not a singular disciplinary problem. It's not as if you could, you're figuring out one reaction or one process and it's completely separated from other things. And so I think the holistic approach is something that students embrace. It's something I think is absolutely necessary as we move forward. And the holistic approach, fundamentally means people will be impacted. And so how are they going to be impacted? How do you make them understand the relevance of what you're doing? These are things that have to be woven into the development of the student, the development of the professional. And so we've worked hard to do that. I think it's a challenge to talk across disciplinary lines, because a lot of us have
very challenging.
we grew up in the silo, and now we're realizing something very different for how we have to train the students. But it's a very rewarding challenge to work with communities, to see the benefits of what you're doing, to see the joy in the students finding value in what they're doing and seeing the value in it. And I think that's going to benefit the future of NOAA, the future of the workforce, weather enterprise.
And if I may just add, and maybe you want to just touch upon, the interdisciplinary nature also, lends itself to the whole Earth system, as I think you both have noted. And you talk about breaking down silos, right? We've all been in atmospheric sciences for a long time, and now we got oceans, land, cryosphere, and we're finding that the predictive services across that whole spectrum is increasing within the enterprise. Okay. So can briefly just talk a little bit about that kind of interdisciplinary challenge as well, with respect to the Earth system. Seppi, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think we're even in the emergency management community, we are hearing more and more kind of moving away from just short-term, let's say, weather phenomenon, and there's a great interest in areas of climate and coastal regions, effect on coastal regions, so long-term impacts, even with urban development. And so there are lots of different areas that even that community is interested in. So our program is, even though we are in a Department of Earth Sciences, and we have geology and ocean sciences and meteorology, but I think to some extent it's interesting that the emergency management component has been the one that has kind of weaved all of these other areas together through this human impact component. So that has been our experience, and kind of extending beyond that. And I did want to mention quickly that, you know, one of the other kind of challenges of these multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary is the way that the universities and the academic departments are set up. And that introduces a challenge. So we fought really hard not to have our program sit in any department. And it's the only multidisciplinary program that, as Vernon mentioned, we have faculty from across colleges at the university that teach, and it just, it works much better. So I know it went away a little bit from your Earth system science question, but I just wanted to mention that's a challenge that goes along the way.
That's great. Vern?
No, I think it's an excellent point. That's, I think, a great example of getting rid of barriers that will inhibit success down the line, and saying, okay, you don't have to do things the way that they have been done in the past. But I think in terms of the Earth system, asking a different question has helped us a lot. And so having social scientists engaged in the ideation of projects in the center, you know, they ask a different climate change question, a sociologist does. Now, to answer that question, you still need to bring in the oceanographers, the earth scientists, the atmospheric scientists, etc. But you're not focused on the phenomena, you're focused on effect. And so we've seen that more social justice types of problems, environmental equity sorts of questions draw in interdisciplinary sciences much more cleanly and easily than working on sort of phenomenological based problems. The AROS campaign, one of the dust campaign, we wanted to know, well, what happens as a dust storm moves across from Africa to the Western Hemisphere? This year happens to be a very dusty year. People are wondering about that. Well, that dust storm affects food security and health and weather, and could affect climate, affects biological productivity in the oceans. One scientist from one background can't address that. And so one of the things that NOAA has been very supportive of is bringing, you know, a team of scientists from a very broad suite of disciplines to address this complex problem, but everybody can pick off what they want in terms of phenomena, but also contribute to this much larger Earth systems, you know, project that enhances modeling, enhances satellite retrievals, and it has all these benefits that we can draw from. So I think it's asking a different question, and perhaps going about things a different way, so that you can really bridge across things. And we've actually had social scientists and psychologists come out on the ship and examine what is the nature of a scientist in this situation, but also examine gender dynamics in field campaigns, which has been a problem, frankly, that needs to be addressed head on. So I think, again, if we ask questions differently, and students, this next or new generation of students really do ask different questions, and we have to listen to them, because I think they're asking the right questions, frankly.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both for those answers. Andrea, do you have questions lined up?
I do. So thank all three of you, actually. I do want to just make a quick logistical update. If you have a question or would like to actually verbally ask a question, please go ahead and use the hand raise function in the webinar software. And we actually already have a list of questions. So I'm going to try and sort through these a bit here and get started and see if anybody decides to be brave and raise their hands. We can hear some other voices. But actually, a couple of these questions are all related to the conversation you're just having with regards to interdisciplinary learning. One of them from Mark Wasaki is asking about the importance or emphasis needed in adding foreign language skills in the academic programs for use in the research and workforce. So any thoughts or comments there?
I can comment from working in community-based research in terms of especially disaster, whether it's response, recovery, or mitigation. And we had a project last year funded through the American Red Cross, but it was a collaboration between the Mexican Red Cross, Canadian Red Cross, and the American Red Cross. And it built on a scenario that if there was a cross-border large-scale disaster, what would be the nature of the response and recovery. And one of the things that came into play quite a bit was not just the language, but also understanding the different cultures. And it was very eye-opening visiting the Red Cross in Mexico City and their kind of interaction with their constituents and how they, had to understand the different communities and so forth. So I would say from that perspective, and this is just a simple example, but I think language is just one part of it, are those cultures and those, beliefs that are also extremely important in making those connections.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I think language is part of it, and language can frame or influence how people perceive messaging that's coming to those communities. And so I think it's broader. It's communication and culture that I think is what the focus should be, a little bit more than a specific language. A lot of messages are translated, but the way they're translated, a lot of times, I speak with some of my colleagues in Puerto Rico, is kind of jokey. It's this literal translation that may not make very much sense, and because it's not, done very well, it's not taken very seriously, and then that means it's not effective. But in this culture and place attachment, define how people respond to external messaging, or who's the message from, how is the message delivered, and so these are really, it's a communications, I think, writ large challenge, and but it's very important to incorporate.
Great. One other question from Bob Goldhammer. He's asking how in the certificate program at Millersville how much of that can actually be satisfied by past experience and training as part of the graduate certificate?
Very good question. So currently, at least this is the way it is at our university, is that we do not accept experiences in place of academic work. But having said that, I'm a firm believer that I believe there, and we have, I would say, about 60% of the students in our especially graduate program are working professionals. We have those that have been working as county emergency manager coordinators to folks that work in the state emergency management agency, and they have so much experience. So certainly most of that can be obtained through that. But at the same time, I would say that there is a theoretical component of the education that is important. And I think that especially in the areas of sociology of disaster and communication and so forth, there is a good bit of theory and research that can guide the practical side. And that's one of the challenges in emergency management now, how we can marry those two areas. So how research can guide practitioners and vice versa. So that's a very good question. And that's the best I can answer.
That sounds good. So actually, there's a couple more questions thinking about how we're adjusting to sort of the new paradigm we're all working towards. So could you maybe reflect on what you might be most proud of in terms of successes in these last 5 months, because then there are a couple of questions that might actually help further that discussion, but you might even highlight some in your response. Vern, you want to take the first stab?
Sure, I'll take the first step. I think two things. One is our execution of our freshman immersion program. A lot of programs went online. A lot of summer programs, summer research programs are really highly challenged by COVID. And so you had, on one hand, a lot of programs were just canceled because they said we can't do it. And so they sort of, as our President Crow says, turtle. They pull their head in the shell and say, we'll just hunker down and wait this thing out. A number of other programs just went completely online. Okay, just I'll give a project that a student can do online and be directed online, and that's fine. What that ignores are students who are learning how to do research, who have not had a research experience yet. It neglects students who might have challenges with access to the internet, stable internet, enough bandwidth to support data transfers and video. And so we carried out our program with that in mind. We provided laptops to the students who were in the program. We provided hotspots to the students who are in the program. We set up the program where they were highly engaged with their mentors, and it wasn't so much, here's your directed learning, go that and do that on your own, but again, a much more immersive, relational sort of program that the students really benefit from. They had a virtual colloquium at the end of the 8 weeks where they did video abstracts that they're online right now, and then did their virtual presentations, and they really shined through this. And so I think having that adaptive flexibility to really show students that you can persevere through this. People are still interested in you. We can't be face to face, physically, but we can be face to face and make time in this virtual space and still get you what you need. So that, I think, was really good. I was really impressed by the students at the end of that. And I think another thing is just sort of adaptive flexibility in this time. Generally speaking, there's a lot of creativity that's happened both in the Research Center at Howard, as well as in the new school that we're at here at ASU, which is about to open classes in 2 days now. I think there's a number of ways that we're becoming more flexible that we wouldn't have as academic institutions. We're highly rigid. We believe in our structures and we stay in our lanes. And this has forced us to do things differently. And I'm really pleased with how people have responded in both institutions, both in my research center at Howard, as well as here in the new college at ASU.
Great, thank you. Seppi?
Yeah, I think I would highlight some student successes. I think some students have been able to still carry out and have meaningful experiences, research and internship. But one thing that I think it's nice to share is that we've been able to engage some of the students in the research of how the universities should be managing their kind of this recovery, whether it's in the initial stage of reopening and then now allowing students on, and then now really our big issue is outbreak mitigation. So involving students in this kind of an ongoing problem that we're trying to solve and looking at it from where they are and how their solutions can actually help others. And it has been a multi-university project in Pennsylvania. And so I would say students have learned a lot. We've learned a lot. We're still learning. I don't know if we'll ever learn everything, but.
That's great. Louis, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I like that, what you're most proud of during this 5-month period. Two things, actually. One, that we haven't closed, and that we've, through the field, working through headquarters, a lot of ideas coming from the field, found ways of keeping ourselves open and serving in ways that were as safe as we could possibly be towards the employees. And certainly you have to keep the safety in mind as the top priority because they are the glue, the key, the basis for us providing the services. So that was point one. Point two is we've continued to hire. We've been blessed with the support of the Congress and the appropriation and the support through NOAA and the Department of Commerce. We've continued to hire. There were a lot of students in the pipeline. This thing broke loose in March. And we got a lot of emails and these servers, these map servers like the Albany runs, we're getting emails about, well, what are you going to do with the Hollings? What are you going to do with the pathway students? What are you going to do for those who are lined up? And we had already decided that we were going to continue our hiring program. And we've brought a lot of people on board and done virtual training. And there's some we didn't close the training center either. There's some training that has to be done face to face, like radar maintenance, for example. So we're doing everything possible. We're adjusting, but we're keeping that pipeline open. And we're very cognizant, obviously, of the impact this was going to have on the students who were in the pipeline coming into the Weather Service and other parts of NOAA. And we have certainly stepped up in that regard as well. So those are the two things I would bring forward.
Yeah, great, thank you. We're going to go now to one of our participants who has their hand raised. Joe Facundo, you have a question. I've unmuted you.
Oh, okay. Hey, Louis. Hey, Bern. Haven't seen you guys a long time. Welcome, Dr. Yalta. I have recruited several of your students, so I'm happy that you're on this conference call. On the federal side, when I worked as a Fed, the biggest challenge that I saw that I was curious to hear, and I didn't quite hear it, but the federal employees having to hire students, for example, through the NCAS-M process or CREST or one of those programs was exceedingly difficult, Louis. You just have to understand that you have to have a federal PIN number. You have to have all kinds of positions set up properly, and you got to go through 100 steps to get somebody hired that you've been working very hard in a mentorship. I'm hoping that process has improved greatly. I didn't hear any numbers, not that numbers matter, but I'd be curious to see if the trend line is more and more diverse students are getting into NOAA than has been over past years. On the non-government side, now that I work with private industry, the biggest challenge is the students are very well educated from all of your efforts, but they're very poor in articulating about themselves and in preparing resumes and doing things that would sell them to private industry so that they have a leg up on other students. And I know that universities don't view that necessarily as part of their role, but somehow that gap has to be filled if private industry wants to take advantage of the excellent, and I will say especially for the University of Mayagüez, which I have my heart with, a lot of those students are amazing, but it's very difficult to get them to be excited about Sioux Falls office or going to Portland, Oregon to take a job. And so these are the challenges that I saw, and I'd like to hear from you all what you have to think about those things.
So if I want to go first.
Louis, it was for you. It was for you.
But I'm hearing his voice again. It's really terrific. So Joe, I have to say this, that in terms of I look backwards, it's been a fail. All right, we have not hired the number of students, and this is something that is being more deeply reflective about with the current social unrest and what's been brought forward. And so we understand that. What the good news is that there are people now within NOAA, within the department, who have now allowed us direct hiring authority. So your question about is it easier? It is easier today. We are just on the front end of this new frontier. And it's something that I've been hoping for a long time. And cite names now like Ben Friedman, Deputy Undersecretary for Operations, Tim Gallaudet, Neil Jacobs, Louisa Koch, many others now have really worked hard in getting us to this place. And we certainly are positioned to take advantage of that. And you're right, these students are fantastic and motivated. And so we look forward to this ability.
Good.
I guess I can follow up since I know Joe. Hi, Joe.
Yeah, Vern.
Good to hear your voice. I think the direct hire authority was one barrier. It absolutely was, and it's good to see that removed. I think we've had a steady stream of students going into the Weather Service, of going into NOAA. We've always challenged NOAA to open up more opportunities and make them easier, and so I think that's happening. In terms of preparation for private sector, you're right. I think students have to be trained on presentation, and we've implemented some presentation webinars and workshops on how to develop, resumes for USA jobs, and specifically resumes for private sector. And those have been successful. Those have been spun up in the last couple of years. And so I think it is a heavily time-intensive endeavor, and so we have to commit those types of resources to making sure that the students are prepared, because a lot of times they don't have as many resources available to them as a number of other places. But we know that they're prepared well to exceed expectations, prepared well to fulfill all the job capabilities. And I think we're getting them excited about Sioux Falls, and I forgot which other place. Portland, Oregon is going to be a tough sell right now. Okay, I'm going to say it right now. Portland's going to be a tough sell, but we might be able to get them excited about Sioux Falls.
Hey, Vern, if they look at the temperature forecast for Phoenix, Arizona, that's going to be a tough sell too.
Yeah.
So,
But they got me, so it's something out here. The dust storms, if they like dust, they come out here for the monsoon season.
Stephanie?
But for some of those locations, we try to sell it to our students that study abroad. So, but thank you for hiring our students. And I agree that this is a challenge in terms of training our students or providing opportunities for them to become better speakers and better writers. And one of the things that we've started to play around with is an integrated approach. So instead of making these outside of their classes experiences or just a presentation here and there, is to try to match courses in English and in speech with our own courses. So they're taught collaboratively as a team taught. So students are learning how to speak the science and write science, as opposed to taking these separate courses and then going through their curriculum. And we're seeing some payoff. It's only, I would say, data from 3 years, but it's showing some improvement. So I'm not sure if it's going to make an impact, but they certainly need that. So that's a very good point that you make. Thank you for your question and comment.
You're welcome.
Great, yes, thank you so much, Joe. So I'm looking at the clock here, we're running out of time, and we won't be able to get into all these questions, but I did want to leave with a few thoughts on some other comments that came in that we need to probably further some discussion on, and this is beyond even the academic community. One from Marshall Moss, he's asking, how can we all together really help students network, particularly now that major conferences are going virtual, not only this fall, but into next year. So, how can we collectively think through ways to better network with our students? And then the other is an idea to further explore, how do we get started building relationships with private industry for possible internships and research opportunities, maybe something such as credit-based courses. That's something else that I'm sure both Seppi and Vernon are already thinking about, but obviously a lot of interest from our participants on today's call. So with that, I do want to wrap for today. We're at the bottom of the hour, and thank all three of our panelists. Louis, Seppi, Vernon, your insights and perspectives have been extremely valuable today. And I know many took away a lot to think about after today's call. And also, I just want to highlight, we do have our upcoming last in a 4-part webinar series is next week. We will be focused around trends and themes for the workforce. This is not just for NOAA, but really across the enterprise, and we'll have some expert perspectives from representatives from McKinsey & Company, our NOAA Deputy Undersecretary for Operations, Ben Friedman, and also representatives from FEMA who will be giving those perspectives. And I also wanted just to give you a potential preview here. We're thinking about really doing a more expanded academic roundtable discussion sometime this fall. We've got to obviously look at a lot of the schedules. I know everybody's times these days are in high demand for virtual gatherings, but we think there's a lot more that we can talk through here, especially as we think about the future for Weather Ready Nation. And then always as we do some calls with our Deputy Director, Mary Erickson. There's a link at the bottom of this slide here. This is where we have been posting the recordings and the presentations from the last few webinars, and we'll do the same for today. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon. And thanks again to all of our panelists.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.